Lord Christopher Monckton. He joins us this morning. Lord Monckton, thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
Can I just clarify to start, sir, are you a member of the House of Lords?
Yes, but without the right to sit or vote.
Because the House of Lords, when you've made that claim before, have consistently said there is no such thing. When peerages were abolished in the mid-1990s, before you inherited your position, there's no such thing as a member of the House of Lords who can't sit and vote. They've repeatedly asked you to stop calling yourself such, haven't they?
No, they haven't, because they have not yet repealed by Act of Parliament the letters patent creating the peerage. And until they do, I am a member of the House, as my passport records. It says I am the Right Honourable the Viscount Monckton of Brenchley, so get used to it.
You would accept that is in dispute from with some people?
Of course there'll be people who will dispute anything they like, but the letters, just listen, the letters patent which created the peerage have not been repealed by Act of Parliament. Just listen,
yes, sir.
And until they are, I remain the Viscount Monckton of Brenchley. I have explained quite straightforwardly that that does not give me the right to sit and vote. That was taken away by the House of Lords Act 1999.
Are you a Nobel laureate, as is claimed on many websites?
I don't know what websites put up about me. There's no website that I control says any such thing. It is, however, quite clear that after a seminar that I had given on the determination of climate sensitivity at Rochester University in Upper New York State, 4 or 5 years ago now, the professor of physics there, a very distinguished man called Professor David Douglas, got up and said that in view of the corrections that I had made to the 2007 IPCC report, I should be regarded as having the same Nobel laureate status as other authors of that IPCC report, and he kindly presented me with a little prize pin, which I wear from time to time as a joke. That's what we on the centre-right would call a joke. It's something you on the left and the APC might not perhaps fully understand.
With the greatest respect, sir, I don't take a position on the left or the right or the centre. I'm simply asking a series of questions.
That's a very welcome change.
I'm trying to establish your credentials to make the claims that you do, because there seems to be a consistent pattern, sir, when you speak publicly and analyse climate science and make pronouncements. And it's my understanding that you've never held any academic position at any university or any research institute attached to any science connected with climate science. But when you make these claims publicly and then your talks are taken and replayed to the authors and the journal writers who you quote, they consistently say, that's not what I meant, that is not the graph, that's a misrepresentation of what I say. There's a very famous case of where one of your talks was taken and every single person who was quoted came back and said, that's not the thrust of what I'm saying. It's suggested by some that you consistently misrepresent and twist fractions of reports and elements of data to create a spiel that's not academically and intellectually consistent.
So far, what we've had from you is, and you say you're not taking any position, it's clearly a position which is deliberately hostile. You're entitled to do that. That's what the ABC is infamous for in this debate. You've only taken one side in it yourselves.
I apologise if you detect any hostility. I'm simply putting out questions, sir, but continue.
Don't be childish. Now, just listen. I would like a specific example, please.
Well, you know the analysis done by J.P. Abrahams of St Thomas University of the speech you gave in the United States. You know the response from a series of climate scientists to the testimony that you gave to the US Congressional Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming. Now,
I want a specific example, please, of one scientist whom you say that I cited incorrectly.
J.P. Abrahams presented to you a list of dozens of them, including Dr. Johansson, for example.
Right. Now, will you please tell me what I got wrong in Dr. Johansson's paper?
I don't have that particular one.
No, I bet you don't. All right.
So... Okay, well, for example, sir, on Alan Jones's breakfast show last year, when you said CO2 was present in the atmosphere 20 times today's levels in the Cambrian era and in the Jurassic era. There is no reference in international peer-reviewed literature anywhere in the world of that happening. Secondly, those changes in CO2 level occurred over 30 million years, not over decades, as is being postulated now. And thirdly, immediately before the Jurassic era, there was the third great mass extinction. You remove those points of analysis and simply claim there was massive CO2 levels back in the Cambrian era, there was some nice coral there, why should we be worried about increased CO2 level? And there are multiple examples of things like that.
Right, now then, I am actually going to try and get a word into this interview now, so you shut up and listen. Let us take Ola Johannesson's paper of 2005, in which, when I cited it in the lecture at St. Paul, Minnesota, to which you refer, I correctly stated that he had said in that paper that across most of the thickness of the Greenland ice sheet, except around the edges, there had been a thickening of that ice sheet for 12 years at a rate of 5 centimeters a year. Now, what so-called Professor Abraham said was that I had not mentioned a paper published by Ola Johannesson in 2009, in which 273 in 2009, that's a different paper, in which 273 billion tons of ice, he said, had gone from the Greenland ice sheet into the ocean. Well, no, I didn't, because at that time that paper hadn't reached me, partly because it hadn't been published at the time I gave the talk. He made his criticism of me 8 months later. However, when I looked at it, and when I replied to Professor Abraham, a reply which I know perfectly well you know exists, but you kind of haven't mentioned to your readers, but it will be available to anyone who wants to look at it at www.scienceandpublicpolicy.org, I calculated that that was 6 inches of the 2 feet of ice that had accumulated, had gone back over the next few years, swings and roundabouts, into the ocean, and that would have caused sea level to rise globally by exactly 0.7 millimeters. And that is the point that Abraham held against me. Had he talked to Professor Johannesson? Not as far as I know.
Do you accept the inaccuracies in your claims about CO2 levels in the Cambrian and Jurassic area that I just outlined that you made on Australian radio last year? They've been thoroughly discredited.
Who have they been discredited by?
By the people who reported it. Sir, you know the reports, you know the names. The people who testified before your response were Dr. Ray Wyman, Dr. Barry Bickmore, Dr. John Abraham, Dr. Michael Mann, Dr. Winslow Briggs, etc., who analysed your submissions to the US Congressional Committee last year.
Oh, yes. Well, now, Dr. Abraham, as we have already discovered, is rather inaccurate in these matters. We can leave him out. Of the 21 authors of the 80-page paper in which they attempted to refute just 4 pages of testimony, which I gave to Congress last May last year, 16 were ClimateGate emailers. These were people who've already been caught out fiddling data themselves. One of them that you've just mentioned, I won't name him because I don't want to have him be done for libel by him. He's rather prone to sue people, is actually under criminal investigation by the Attorney General of Virginia at this moment for allegedly having defrauded taxpayers under the Fraud Against Taxpayers Act by producing bogus results himself.
Is that claim as accurate as the claims you made about people on Australian radio last year being under investigation for criminal investigation for fraud who weren't? So if we can move on from there, because
I will finish the answer. And this particular scientist you have quoted is under criminal investigation. If that's the best you can do, if that's the best the ABC can do, I think you need to try a little harder. What is interesting is that so far you have been unable to raise a single scientific point on which I'm wrong. Let us now take the matter, for instance, of CO2 concentration. In the Cambrian era, it was indeed present at around 20 times today's concentration. In the Triassic,
but that had accumulated over 30 million years, not in the space of the next 50 years as people are coming. It's the impact on systems that are dependent.
I'm sorry if you can't understand the difference between 30% CO2 in the atmosphere, as it was, shall we say, in the Neoproterozoic era, and 0.04% CO2 today, up from 0.03% over a period of 270 years, then you're clearly not quite getting the things into proportion. The calcite corals evolved in an environment when there was something like 20 times as much CO2 as there is today. The aragonite corals, the more delicate ones, evolved also when there was around 15 times as much CO2 as there is today. And I get these figures from, for instance, Professor Ian Plimer of the University of Adelaide, who is a geologist specializing in the development of past civilizations, past geological formations.
Do you accept that there is...
Just let me finish the answer. Stop interrupting.
I'm sort of purely doing it because we are very pressed for time, and there's a couple of other issues I want to get to.
No, if you won't let me finish the answer, we can end the interview now. I'm going to finish the answer.
Well, with the greatest respect,
I'm going to finish the answer.
Yes, sir.
And it'd be quicker if you just let me finish it. I would have finished it by now if you'd just been less unpleasant and allowed me to finish
Apologies
it.
for my unpleasantness, sir.
So be quiet and just listen.
We will finish the interview there. It's 10 minutes to 7 on 702. That's not going anywhere, Lord Monckton, and you know exactly why that's going nowhere. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, for not getting to the questions that we wish to.